Very good evening and welcome to the 11th episode of Wellness Changemakers Leadership Edition. We are back after a 2 week break, and boy, do we have a treat for you today. I do hope that everyone has been doing well. I know that the country is gradually unlocking, and for any viewers we have from abroad, you know, really hoping that you are safe, you're well, everyone's in your family is safe and well, all your loved ones are safe and well. So today we have a very special guest. We are joined by Miss Vinita Ramtri today, who will be sharing. We will of course get to know her more as the we go through get through the session. But just to give you a small introduction about her, Vinita is the director for risk and governance at HSBC. She has thrived in the corporate world for over 22 years now, and this journey has spanned over four industries and three countries. It's really impossible for me to memorize this. That's why, unfortunately, I have to read it out. So please don't mind that. And she has worked with some leading brands and FTSE 100 firms, including the Oberoi Hotels, B Sky B, and Barclays. Uh, Again, there's a lot more to Vinita, but all to mention, she's a professional and personal coach. She has written two books, has over 500 short pieces to her name, and yeah, we'll be talking more about Vinita as the session progresses. Vinita, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for joining us all the way from London in the middle of the afternoon.
No, thank you so much. I mean, I can understand. Thank you for organizing the session as well. And it's about 7 p.m. for those in India, so it's late in the evening. But I hope the time's not too inconvenient. We're trying to find something that kind of suits more geographies. So thank you guys for coming along as well. And I look forward to a lot of interaction. So please keep your questions coming because while we've got conversation here going, but we'd love to hear from you as well. And I hope everyone in your family is safe too. So thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you, Vinita. Yeah, just to remind everyone, Vinita is joining us from London, UK, where she's based out of, and works with HSBC, as I mentioned. So let me just start with very simply, Vinita. How are things going at your end? I hope the past 1.5 years. How have they been for you personally and professionally?
That's a great question. A big question, though.
Of
I'll
course.
try and summarize it for you in the key points as to what they have meant, of course. So I think, like a lot of us, I went into the past 1.5 years. I'm slightly a more rose tinted glasses person. So I would have thought that, okay, this is all going to be over in a few months' time and it's never going to be going on for that long. But of course, I was in for a bit of, I would say, surprise or shock, whichever way you put it. But it was unfortunate. And we had to be home as with everyone else. For me personally, I would say I found the time extremely, I would say, a good period to discover and be with myself and to have time to myself. So in that sense, of course, everything else, it's very unfortunate to be seeing, and of course, to when your family's impacted as well. From that perspective, it was rather unpleasant and of course a bit sad as well. But along with that, I kind of tried to make sure, and we'll come to this as we talk about it, but from an emotional intelligence or self awareness perspective, I really use that time, I would like to think, to see, what is it that I can be doing in my space to make sure that I make the most of this extra time I've got to hand and not, let it go like a downward spiral. And yeah, so I did use the time personally to do a lot of things. I've read so much over the last 1.5 years, and I've also finished my third book, The Draft. So and spent a lot of time with children, reconnected with both my kids at a much deeper level, I would like to think. And from a work front, nothing really stopped at all from my perspective, and I continued to work throughout. So it was actually a bit tougher at the work front, right? Because you got to manage the children and the work scenario. and I continued all of that throughout. So I'd say at some points it's challenging, some points it was a little rewarding when you don't have to rush to take the train and rush back and get delayed and get caught in cancellation. So those little points I enjoyed. Some points were really, really difficult as well.
Thank you so much. We're just glad that you're well and everyone's well at your end. Um, I'm glad that you brought up the point of emotional intelligence because that is the first question I did want to ask you. It's a term that is, I think, thrown around a lot. You should be emotionally intelligent. It helps you regulate your emotions better. It helps you become more resilient. Vanita, what exactly is emotional intelligence, if you could tell us?
So, if I'll try to put it really simply, and I don't want to use a lot of posh languages or posh definitions, but really in your life. So, where does it stem from? Let me give you a bit of background to it as well. Is that up until the 1990s, we always had this belief that, as humans, we had a belief that the most important thing, or one of the key things that marks your success in your life and your career, is your intelligence quotient, which is essentially your IQ. And then there was studies done. Essentially, one of the key people in that space is Daniel Goleman, which I suppose some of you have heard of. But there was a lot of studies done there to figure, what else is it besides that common denominator, essentially. So if I had, 10 people with the same sort of IQ, what is it that gives one person a little more edge over the others? And what is it that sets people apart in that sense? Like, how do you deal with a certain situation versus how do I deal with that situation, given that we've got the same kind of skill level or the same intelligence? So that those things came in to then form this bubble of competencies that we would call emotional intelligence, such as how do you actually deal with various things, such as if you've got to motivate yourself, like what gets you out of bed in the morning every day. So that's not something that your intelligence can decide, like your bog standard. I might score 100 and you might score 100 in a test in math, but that's not going to determine whether we work the same way and we're able to deal with adversity the same way. So that other kind of mysterious package of things I would call emotional intelligence in my day-to-day life, right? So if I give you a simple example, like I wake up every morning and 5:30 I'm in the gym, right? 5:30 to 6:30 I work out. Now, what is it that gets me to the gym? And you can say it's important to whether regulate it, and that's essentially a second part. But the outcome of emotional intelligence is that ability to continue your life in a much calmer or motivated manner, in a more consistent manner. So those are essentially the outputs of being emotionally intelligent. And a lot of people don't realize that. We put labels to it like discipline or hard work. But where does it all stem from? I believe a lot of it stems from the ability to understand your own self, and that is emotional intelligence. Like when you're very, very the key competencies here are like when you're very self-aware. That's the first underpinning thing to say, okay, simple example, Serge, if you did something, you go, okay, whenever I do this, I feel really rubbish by the end of my day. So I'm self aware. And you're constantly using that knowledge to train your brain to say, if that happens, it leaves me feeling really bad. So next time I'm not going to do it like that. I'm going to do it another way. That kind of loophole is the way you would see emotional intelligence play out in your day-to-day life. Does that help?
Absolutely. I think that clears a lot of things. And folks, I hope that that is something that gives you a good introduction into this topic, which has it's probably become all the more pertinent given the past 1.5 years for a lot of us. Uh, let's talk about the word leader that is in our Wellness Changemakers Leadership Edition. When it comes to leaders, whether it be CXOs or HR leaders and HR, or not just leaders, even HR community in general, what is the importance of emotional intelligence in terms of their organization?
So I think the big thing here is, so if you imagine emotional intelligence like this iceberg, okay, and if you see underneath the iceberg is things that people can't see, which I just spoke about right now, right? Your self-awareness, or your ability to motivate yourself, or your ability to regulate your own emotions to go, well, that is how I think, and this is how certain disruptions affect me and my own mindset, right? But what you do as a result of that is what the entire world sees, which is your organization or your team, is that top part of that iceberg. So all of what's going on beneath that water is essentially me managing my own emotions, which anyone will not see. But what you do see, for example, you see me speaking right now, right? So that is the top part of that iceberg where you go, okay, how does one person manage their relations with the other person? And this is where emotional intelligence comes in. So often they say, like I think Aristotle has a quote, right, where he says, to get angry is easy, but to get angry with the right person at the right time for the right reason to the right degree is not easy, right? So the same kind of concept plays out when you're in an organization. If you've got a feeling, you can sense saying, okay, I'm starting to feel angry. You have a physiological reaction to this, which will be, there will be your brain sending signals, and you will feel that in your hands, blood surging into your hands, or if you're feeling scared, blood surges like into your feet to have, the fight or flight kind of responses. But emotional intelligence is being able to configure that into your head and say, okay, I'm starting to feel angry. So when you're a leader, let's say in a meeting, and you're fully aware that there's a certain thing which is not working out for you, that's when then your emotional intelligence plays out to say, okay, this is how I'm feeling, but how am I going to process that emotion, and how am I going to then use that to carry that conversation further towards success, right? So that's where emotional intelligence plays a really big role, because you can only start to build really solid relations with others when you've got a really deep understanding of who you are. Why are you behaving a certain way? How are you feeling? How are you processing that? And when you can figure that out, you can then start to operate from a very authentic and a very transparent viewpoint, because otherwise you hear so much about authenticity as well, right? So when we're not comfortable in ourselves, let's assume that I'm very, very scared and I'm nervous right now or whatever, and then I'm trying to pretend that I'm not, then that will show. You will know that I'm not being authentic. So leaders, if we need to be able to work with a team and be authentic, the key thing is first to start to understand yourself really well, because that's when you have a good chance at working with people.
And my follow-up question is sort of, you have touched upon it, but what does emotionally intelligent leadership look like, in the sense that if you were to compare, say, a company which doesn't have a very emotionally intelligent leadership in general, or even the HR department as compared to one that does, what are some distinguishing characteristics?
So, very, very cool question. Let's start first with an organization that's not emotionally intelligent. Okay, so a leadership or a team that is completely tone deaf to emotional intelligence. And there's a lot. I was speaking with a friend yesterday, and what he said is, the good, the problem with emotional intelligence is you either have it or you don't have it. So let's assume we don't have it in the team, and people don't get that. Now, if you imagine, if I go into a workplace like that, what you'll have is you come into the meeting, and you're only listened to for what you're saying. So let's assume you have a presentation and you're putting through your presentation. If I am showing any signs of nervousness, or if I'm showing any signs of discomfort, then things like that in a tone deaf, when I say emotion tone deaf, like when the undertone is not being captured in an organization like that, you're only seeing what's on top of the iceberg. You're only seeing what's actually being presented, and you're not seeing culturally what's going on beneath that. So an organization lacking in emotional intelligence will just have, clear, tangible metrics and everyone trying to achieve those. But somewhere along the way, if you have problems, you'll have problems which are where people are, unable to achieve those targets, or people are struggling in certain ways. They've got well-being issues, or they've got, stress, they've got mental health problems. All of those things will kind of stay under that surface, and you're never going to see them, because if as a leader or as an organization we don't send out the messages, or the subtle cues that help people to build stronger relations, you're never going to know these things. So you'll start to see this divide of, I come into work and I'm a performer and I'm here to perform, and if I'm struggling, then no one here wants to know. So I don't bring my whole self to work, right? I just come here and I try and work till, let's say, you burn out or you can't cope anymore. So the first part, where you have an organization that is lacking in emotional intelligence, what you will typically see is you will see cultural problems, but you will really struggle. And that's where you see a lot of organizations have these massive initiatives or massive surveys to find out what is the problem. Because if I believe if an organization is emotionally intelligent, a lot of those things will be obvious because you're talking to people, you're listening to people, you're empathizing, you're building relations. So you're seeing the subtle problems. But when all of that is lacking, you will just see attrition, you will see whether targets are being missed or there's cultures of bullying or things like that. That's what a lacking emotional intelligent organization looks like. And they say, another quote I was listening to somewhere, it said like CEOs are hired for their skills, but they're usually fired for the lack of emotional intelligence, where they can't get people to buy in with them. So another problem in lacking emotional intelligence is you're not going to win hearts and minds. You can give a target to someone and say, go and achieve this target, and they'll probably do it or try and do it till they burn out. But they're never going to tell you, look, I don't understand it, or I don't want to do it, or I don't agree with it. And that's where those behaviors start to go then. Does that answer the first part?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Cool. The next part then is an emotionally intelligent organization, I would say, is when you are, and with coaching we have that, like when you're actually talking to a person. So when you're all listening to me, you're listening to my words, but along with that, you're listening to my tone, you're listening to my body language. And if I suddenly became very nervous or if I became very anxious, you will start to notice that. And that is what an emotionally intelligent conversation looks like, where you'd go, Vinita, I noticed you suddenly, you don't seem like yourself today. Is there a problem? Is there anything you need help with? And I had that actually, one of the conversations I was having a few days ago, and I won't give obviously any more details, but essentially here was a person telling me that they're not enjoying their work. And then when I probe a little deeper and a little deeper, and I say, well, that's not like you, and what happened? And that's when you've got to pick up the emotional cues. And I could have just said, oh, all that's fine. Let's just go straight to the target. And I could just, push a person straight into that conversation. But as an emotionally intelligent leader or organization, you have to be able to sense and have that sharpness to say, okay, now's not the time to talk about the target. Now's the time to figure out what is going on here. If a person is struggling, what is going on? So I essentially tried to probe a little deeper and deeper, and you figure out that there are problems at home. Now, that's not something a person is always going to come and tell you up front, but you've got to be emotionally intuitive enough to pick up, to give people that space to be able to speak. And, it's to say it's okay to talk, and it's okay to sometimes say, listen, I can't cope with this today. And as an organization, what you will get then is you might slow down for the day, you might slow down for the week, but over the longer term, you're doing the right thing. Because I don't believe in organizational success at the cost of societal success. So if an organization has to prosper, it needs a prosperous society too. And we need to think of that bigger picture and to see how we can ensure we've got happy people first.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the one thing that kind of stands out from everything that you mentioned is there seems to be an environment of psychological safety in an emotionally intelligent leadership, wherein people actually feel secure enough to be able to open up about their vulnerabilities and insecurities without the fear of judgment.
It's absolutely that. And it's about creating that safety, right? Because you'll see so many times, people will say that, let's assume there's someone who's lesbian or gay. They would say, I was given that safe space to come out and to be able to say this, and my manager actually encouraged me. And things like that, they make a huge difference, because that's when, like you said, it's that psychological safety, and it's okay to speak. And no matter who you are, you belong, so you are not being judged. I think those are the little things. There was a really one of those little stories that you get sometimes on social media. I was reading a story, like one person went into a place where they made a mistake. So they were let's say a place of worship, and they said, okay, I've made this mistake, and they were judged, and they said that okay, you've made this mistake, and these are essentially things you should not have done, and therefore you shouldn't be coming here, or whatever, as an example, right? versus this person then goes into just meeting with friends into, let's say, a bar or a pub, and they just sat there and say, I made a mistake. And that's where the friends say, oh, it's okay, mistakes happen and it's fine, and we all make mistakes, and they start talking about it. So where is this person going to gravitate towards? Although we might think, okay, we want to gravitate towards a higher career success, but as human beings, we want to be in a space where we feel that we're accepted for who we are. Of course, everyone likes that challenge to be improving constantly, but no one likes rejection, right? So people need to be feeling that, okay, whatever my problems, here's where I can talk. And that's when I would say it is that safety, but you'll also, one, I think from organization perspective, a lot of organizations, of course, are trying to remediate their culture and to fix corporate behaviors and things like that. So in that, it's emotional intelligence has such a key role to play. I cannot emphasize it enough, because that's when you're going to create that space where people will come and tell you the problem before anyone else outside says, or before your customer says, here's something wrong. Trust me, it's your people already know it. So all you need to do is create that environment where someone finds a problem and can come to you and say, look, I think there's a problem. But that can only come through emotionally intelligent leadership.
Thank you so much. And I'm loving it that people are really sharing their questions already, and we will be coming to them. Actually, at this point, I do want to take up one audience question in the middle because it is relevant to a discussion that we are already having. So, Manu Sharma has shared a couple of questions. I'm going to take up one of them, which is that as a leader, I'm assuming that this is from the perspective of leader, that at times people may not really be aware themselves that they are under stress. So how can leaders manage such kind of a situation?
So here, the way I'm looking at it is the leader's probably picking up that the person is under stress, and the person
Yeah,
isn't picking up, right? Is that what Manu, you're trying to say? I'm guessing that, right?
I believe it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's assume, there's a scenario, and a leader can manage that kind of situation by really, I mean, I just believe in 100% honest leadership, right? I will never, ever, if I was to lie or hide or conceal something from somewhere, let's say, Manu, I see that you're stressed and I want to tell you, but then I feel you might feel bad. That's not the right thing to do by you, right? So the most important leadership parameter has to be what is the right thing by Manu, right? It's not about what will make Vinita popular. So that has to be a first threshold of various things. And I also follow that in all my coaching sessions. Like I say to someone, if you never want me to coach you again, that's fine, but I have to tell you the truth, or I have to show you, how your thinking could be adjusted. But essentially, how you can manage this is really help people to work through scenarios to say, okay, here's, like, I was, let me give you a simple example. Someone says, okay, I was in this conversation and here's what I ended up saying. So sorry, I'm just seeing a question pop up, but yeah, so if we're having a conversation and something makes me pick up to say, well, that is a response in stress that you probably given, leaders can guide that person to say that, as I was saying previously, like, you don't seem to be yourself these days, is something the problem. So one is, create that space, like step back, so you're giving room to the other person to step forward to say, look, I think, is anything a problem, or is there anything you want to talk about? And then people will just open up. That's one part. The other part is, obviously, if they are not still able to realize that they're stressed, then you might want to recommend to them just something or the other that will help break things away. To say, you can create sessions for the team to say, every Friday, let's have a bit of, where the entire team comes together, they have a bit of music, or to say, let's have a one-on-one where we're talking only about your career, we're not talking about work. So I would say, if a person doesn't realize or is shying away from it, don't rub it in a lot of ways, because different people react differently to being told that they're stressed, and maybe just look for ways to help them relax without making them more stressed, if that helps.
Thank you so much. I hope, Manu, that we were able to answer your question here. Uh, my next question is a question that we also put up on our LinkedIn page today, and the question is: Are leaders allowed to panic? Right, because there is a very mythical view of this creature, which is the leader. It's not necessarily affected by things, and definitely shouldn't be able to panic. And interestingly, so we got about 100 responses to this poll, and 16% still said no, they should not be able to, they're not allowed to panic. So I would love to know what you think about it.
I think there's two dimensions to it. It's a brilliant question, and thank you for even coming up with a question, and thank you for responses, guys. So if I look at the 16% first, so let's go to the 16. Is if I'm looking at someone as a leader, right? So if I'm living in London right now, I've got, let's say, Boris Johnson as the leader, right? And we go, okay, the lockdown's supposed to ease on the 19th of July, and suddenly our leader panics, right? Now, obviously, from a 16% perspective, you look at it to say, I trusted you to lead
Yeah.
the nation, and now you're panicking. Where does that leave me? Right? So you kind of expect the leader to have a certain amount of, calm or ability to maneuver, manage, and plan for these scenarios, work with his team so that the leader doesn't panic. Now, that's one part. But if I go to the other part, which is this whole mythical creature, who is the leader? The leader essentially, as we say, when if you're leading, don't walk behind me or don't walk in front of me, but essentially take your team along with you. So if you start to look at a leader from that perspective, to say you're actually taking the team along with you, you are one of them. That's first part. Second is everyone expects the leader to be authentic as well. So if I would say the first part is leaders, if they're emotionally intelligent, their likelihood to panic will already be less. So if your leader is panicking regularly, then I would say that is a concern, and we need to probably look at, saying, is this is this the right role? Because is the leader kind of, put in a very difficult scenario? Are they out of their depth and things like that? But every so often there can come a scenario where a leader also panics, because essentially we're talking about, whether it's the pandemic and suddenly if things aren't working. And these days, obviously, with a lot of digital scenarios, or there could be cyber attacks, there could be things where, there could be family problems. There could be so many things where, as human beings, we will just panic. What is a leader to do then? So I would say the leader should not ideally panic, because they should be in a space where they can, kind of manage their emotions better, and they should have worked out scenarios in their mind to say, well, that could happen, because that's what we say, right? What keeps a leader awake at night? So the leader's already thinking, well, what about that? What about that? What about that? So you're already thinking of your business continuity plans and things like that. However, there will come some points, if the leader panics, then the leader has to already have thought through those scenarios to say, okay, I've panicked and I need to have my backup. So I would say they can panic, but they will quickly have to go into finding what is the way to then recover from that. And that could even mean asking the team for their views, right? So you can say, okay, guys, I'm not sure what to do in this scenario. Let's all meet up and let's put our heads together to figure out what's the best way to solve it. The most important thing is to be honest and authentic. So that's, I would say, that balance between moving from, as you probably come out at some point, moving from that panic situation to the perspective situation, to say, here's what I'm seeing. I probably need some skills which I don't have. Who in my team can help me, or who from an external party can help me, and where can I find that? That ability to think fast is a leader, right? And I was reading a book, which I've been watching movies or even reading a book, like, I don't know if you've seen The Darkest Hour. It is essentially Winston Churchill just before he decided to go into the Second World War. Now, essentially, that's a very panicky situation. And you can see, if you see the movie, he might panic on his own and he might panic with his closer team. But when he reaches out to the nation, then he's always trying to encourage and motivate the nation. So it's about also trying to figure out who is your trusted circle, where you can say, okay, guys, we need to sort this out. And then how do you reassure the people who are relying on you? Because a lot of this is about doing, like I always say, doing the right thing by the people. Because you panicking is not going to help everyone, right?
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, we would come to how to go from that panic stage to perspective stage. And you did talk about putting your heads together with your team members, actually identify team members who can potentially help you out. Could you give us a little more, maybe some more tips in terms of how do I, as a leader, go from panic to perspective?
I think the key things really, and my book was entirely about like setting up a business. So it was a completely different, like a wider scenario. I can't say different scenario, but how you would go from that is, like I'd say, have your tools lined up to say, okay, these are why am I panicking? So again, it goes back. I think a lot of this hinges back into emotional intelligence, right? And one of the biggest tools that I personally swear by and I love is just journaling. And that can really help you move very, very quickly from panicking to perspective, or even from chaos to getting more organized. And I was reading a lot of books. I think it's Jack Welch, Lee Iacocca, some of the others, but a lot of them like just always will say, if you cannot write down an idea, then it's not fully thought through. So in order to be able to move from where you are, and goes back to your point as well initially, Manu, about stress. If you're able to, as a leader, sit down saying something is not right here and I need to figure this out, then you really have to start with a pen and a paper, in my view, right? You can start with conversations with people, that's fine. But there comes a point when you've had enough input from external parties and you've got to just sit down with, clear your head and go, what on earth is going on? And that's when you start to see what is your purpose. And everything, in my view, has to start with that bigger purpose. Now, I'm not talking here about your personal purpose, but your organization, because you're talking from a leadership context, right? So, why is it that you're in that position? What are you here to deliver for the organization? And in order to deliver that, what is it that you require? Now, if I say I have to, let's say, deliver a solution that works during the pandemic, I need to take my business digital overnight, right, for my customers, and they need it. And I'm panicking because I don't know that. So, what takes you from that panic to that perspective is to say, okay, I need to switch from a retail outlet, as an example, to a digital solution in, let's say, 3 weeks. And then you start really planning to say, and how am I going to do that? When you start structuring that through meticulous, planning, is when it will take you through to perspective to say, okay, this is something I can do versus this is something I probably don't want to be doing, or I want to be outsourcing to someone. But the only way is to stop panicking and to start structuring. Because even with EI, Suresh, the main thing is your brain has finite capacity. And if you're going to use that capacity in just thinking and mulling over things and not actually working towards a solution, then you're working at a very suboptimal level. So, one of the key things for emotional intelligence is that when you're caught in those scenarios, you need to take a break. So, even when there's like husband and wife, or children and parents, or within team meetings, people are just clashing. The one of the biggest things to resolve a lot of these is just to take some time out, so that you can develop that brain capacity, free up the brain a little bit, so that you can work towards a solution. So I'd say the first immediate step should be reduce the panic level and then start planning to get to the perspective. Because a lot of people are so caught in the panic that they can't think ahead. And that's when you're like a hamster, you're just rolling in, oh, I have a problem, oh, I have a problem, and I can just think problem to problem to problem and no solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a vicious circle. So often.
It is, and it rubs on the team. So
Yes.
I would say when a leader is panicked, one of the biggest things is to not pass it on to the people.
Sure. Yeah. I have a question here from Muhammad Ayub Ifan, and he says that could you tell us a little bit about how understanding the psychology of human behavior can be used to create maybe a good work culture and a good team culture.
I think about it, Mohammed. I think that's a great point. And I would say understanding the psychology of human behavior, yes, sure, it can help you with a good work culture, a good team culture, but the benefits go so much more than that. Okay, so the first part is the benefits here, I would say, go into like managing, or managing yourself, as I said in the first space, but also how you get along with your spouse, how you get along with your child, how you guide them. So work and team is just one dimension before I go any further, right? Now your question here is about how can it be used, is like I explained to you, is in the pre in when you are dealing with people, a lot of times we think we are just dealing with targets, and we think we're dealing with objectives, and we go, you had to make 10 calls in the day, right? And someone did not make 10 calls in the day. Now to really manage your team and to manage that conversation, you need to understand what happened. What happened? Was the target too high? Was this person struggling to make those calls on that particular day? Or was it, what is going on in their lives and how can you help? Because if you cannot go into that psychology of that person, you're just going to slam more and more targets on that person to say, you didn't do 10 today, so you got to do 20 tomorrow. Or you didn't do 10 today, so maybe you are not up to speed with the team. But if you're really looking to build a team where people come in and they feel that they belong, then you have to tap into hearts and minds of people, right? You have to have where a person says, okay, this person really, moment, like sometimes when you talk to people and you say, they really get me, they really get me, they understand who I am. Another part that you will see in your team culture is they will want to open up to you, they will want to work for you. And all that can only come from tapping into the psychology of a person, because we all like to believe that we are vice presidents and directors or whatever else in the world, or managers or whatever. But the main thing here is we're people. At the baseline, we're people, and people connect with people. So you've got to figure out how you can connect with the next person so that they actually want to be with you and to work with you. And as they say, even in hiring or in team working, they say, people always want to work with people that they get along with and they want to spend the day with. So that's where your entire psychology comes in. It's very hard to put a number. I was reading like IQ has, let's say, 20% impact on your success, and emotional intelligence can have a certain amount of impact on your success. But I think the number is so hard because, in my view, it's almost like 100%, right? So you can be very, very, you've seen people who are very intelligent but completely unable to apply that intelligence, or completely unable to take people with them on that, to say, okay, you're so intelligent, but why should I do what you want me to do, right? So that part is all emotional intelligence, and it is all the psychology, as you're asking. Try it. I would say the best thing to do here is to try and understand, take as an example, to do a little bit of test over here. If you have, let's say, 4 people in your team, spend time with 2 people, even just 30-minute calls in maybe every 15 days, just to say what's going on in your life, what's motivating you, what are you looking forward to, what's bothering you, and see the difference in their performance or their engagement versus 2 other people, where you start your calls with, okay, how are we doing on the objectives, let's just go straight into the objectives, and you will see the difference yourself.
Hence the term psychology and psychological safety, I guess.
It is, and I mean, ultimately, what are we, right? I mean, what caused you to listen to this session, right? So anyone listening over here, right? We've got Belinda, we've got Suman, we've got Supam. What caused you to click this button? It is your psychology. It is something that made you feel, I want to hear this, right? It is not. It's not. None of this is forced stuff, right? So all of us understand that there is something here that I want to do. And that's what I'm trying to say. You can create that desire in your own team by tapping into people's psychology. And for that, you need to wake up to not say, what can I get from this person? It is, how can I make this person's day better? Because that's what will drive people.
That's a lovely thing to say. I think it's a very important lesson for me as well. It's something that I should definitely be doing more. And
Just here, if I just add while you're saying this, so from an emotional intelligence standpoint, so I'll just add to what you're saying. So there's another concept in emotional intelligence, which is the emotional economy. So while as leaders, we're thinking, okay, this is an economy, right? So I've got costs and I've got benefit, right? So if I'm costing something, let's say 200,000, I need to make a profit of 400,000. The same thing works in emotional intelligence as well. You've got an emotional economy. So any of you, and I would love to hear this from you after the session, but when you click into the session, as a typical example, so let's assume 7 o'clock in India or 2:30 in the UK, you click in. 3:30, when you click out of this, do you feel better or do you feel worse? Now, that is the concept of emotional economy. Is like, did I pass you a more negative emotion or did I pass you a more positive emotion? And if you can start looking at every single meeting with that benchmark to say, emotionally, whatever negativity I took versus whatever positivity I gave, or, whatever is the positive negative exchange over here, how a person coming to me should always leave happier. And if you're able to set that for yourself, then I think you can just create a much happier team.
Oh, 100%. I think that's so true. Uh, I want to remind everyone that we are taking questions now. So please, if you have any questions for Vinita, we are here for another 20 minutes. Please do share them in the comments section. I
Praveen Sax from Patna, Bihar. So hi, thank you for letting us know. Sorry, go on.
No, no worries. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone who has joined us today. And I have a question here again from Manu that I did want to ask you, which is that that Vinita, you mentioned an emotionally intelligent organization in today's time. What is the most significant aspect that helps an organization to continue to be on that path?
Significant aspect that helps organizations, I think, is really the tone from the top, right? So often in it depends on organizations. So to be completely honest, so there are certain organizations which are very more a lot more, financially driven and might not be very emotionally driven. So the key thing here is to understand that there needs to be a tone from the top where you're not frowning upon psychology, you're not frowning upon emotions, because the last thing you need is someone kind of making fun of all this touchy feely soft stuff, saying, oh, I don't do feelings and I don't talk about all this stuff. When you have that, then people start to go back into their bubble. Like I said, if that psychological safety is gone, like let's assume that I'm in a meeting and someone starts to cry, and for whatever reason, if I just say, okay, listen, do you want to just discontinue this meeting? And, I can't, in some way I put them down for being softies, or in some way, whatever way, if I create that atmosphere, the next time people will switch off and people will not connect in the same manner. And I'm sure all of you've seen this in some way, right? We find a safe space, we open up to people, and then suddenly something happens and someone laughs at us or someone just makes fun of our feelings, and then we don't want to share our feelings the next time. So the most important thing here is to appreciate a person's feeling, and even if you don't agree, it's not for you or me to agree or disagree with anyone's feeling. The important aspect that keeps this going is that respect, to say, you may feel very different to how I feel, but you're okay and I'm okay. It doesn't have to be my way or your way, and we can agree to feel completely differently and still be working together and happily. So that's kind of very important, I would say, because I'm sure, I mean, happy to see your comments on that, but I'm sure you can all think of times and moments when you've shared your emotions and then felt ridiculed or unheard and then stopped sharing them again.
And again, I think that basically reflects leadership needs to be emotionally intelligent and needs to be empathetic.
And you have to keep that going, right? So it's like motivation. You have to keep that going, to say every day a person talks to you, every day you should be there to at least acknowledge that. You don't have time, that's fine, but at least don't put someone down or don't undermine their emotion. That's, I think, the key thing.
Since we're talking about the organizational level of things, there's one question that we received from one of our registrants for this session. And the question was that what should organizations do to improve the wellness factor of employees in this pandemic era?
Oh, that's a really good question, and I have a lot of opinions on that, and I can tell you. So there's two parts to it, right? So one is the organization doing a lot of things for people. So that, I say, wellness is very important. It's much more important these days than we've heard of even before, because of current circumstances. And I don't think an organization can do enough in terms of trying to support people. So what can they do? Of course, there are several initiatives, right? There are talks that organizations will do. There are one-on-one counseling support sessions that people will do. There is just reaching out to various people who need support, and trying to figure out what is it that they require, constantly talking about it, reinforcing the messages in the meeting, making sure that people's workloads are manageable, people have the choice of whether they can work from home. If they're not comfortable, then where else can they go to work? And just the various things that people can do, increase your frequency of your one-on-ones and everything. So there are a lot of initiatives, or have mobile apps where people can trace what they're eating and how well they're feeling. So there are a whole host of initiatives that an organization can have, or partner with, like apps such as well-being apps and things, to say, okay, you've got a free membership, or you've got free membership to Audible or whatever, go listen to free books or whatever that an organization can do. But that's one part. I think another key part that is often probably not, I find sometimes it could be reinforced more, is that taking personal accountability. And if you see in my feeds, my posts that I write very often, I write about that really often, because you can have 20 initiatives that are being done for you, but what happens from our personal standpoint, a lot of times we are then becoming very accustomed to someone else looking out for us. And my personal parameter in life is that the first thing should be, what am I doing to look after myself, right? And that is where organizations could do more to also help people to think in a way that they start with self love, right? So it should be a case of, okay, I this is my holiday, I shouldn't be working on my holiday, I should be taking rest. Or this is I need to work out because it's good for my health. So a lot of times I think the focus on saying you should be doing this because it's good for you is a key part that should be, I would say, a little more emphasized.
So, first of all, thank you for that. And we have a question here from Asma, and I think we kind of touched upon it, but I would just like to go. How do we practically become emotionally intelligent?
How do we practically become emotionally intelligent? Oh, that's really cute. But how do we become that? So I would say one of the key things, Asma, and do feel free to comment who you live with, and because I personally find in my life, one of the key learning grounds for emotional intelligence is spending time with children. And I don't mean it in a bad way to say go spend time with children, just to understand that. But if you just sit there and you just watch them and you observe them, you will see and learn almost to say how sharp they are in terms of their own emotional intelligence. So they can see, children can pick up, right? Because they might not be conversing with other children, but they can pick up. Like if one child is not playing and is sitting at the corner of a classroom and is not engaging, the other children will pick it up, and the other children will do something, and they will go find that kid and they will talk to that kid, or they will try and go to their own mom and they will say that that kid has whatever, needs help and has a problem. And all of this will happen even without conversation with another child. So I would say children are just naturally adept at picking up things which are not verbally said. And that is a big part of emotional intelligence. So if you were to just observe, then I would say find these places where you can just sit quiet, because emotional intelligence is, yes, one about listening to what I'm saying, the other is how I'm speaking. But the third is, if I just don't speak a word over here, if I just sit here for the next 15 minutes, what can you tell about me? So that is how to build your emotional intelligence. So I would say sit at a train station, if you have to, sit outside a coffee shop, watch people, see what they're doing, and try and understand what's going on in others' lives. Because I think the problem where it becomes is we don't understand, okay, what is Asma going through? I will go and meet Asma to say, this is what I want from Asma. And we go straight into what we want. And a lot of times, people write to me on LinkedIn in messages, and they go straight into, Vinita, I need this, I need this, I need this from you. And they, it's like they don't ask me where I am, how I am, or what I'm doing. It straight goes into, this is what I want from you. So emotional intelligence is quite the reverse. As I said, it's about what is it that a person's going through and how can you connect with them, right? So Asma, really think about it in that sense. Tip the scale over the next time you see someone, to say what is going on in their life, and where in their life's journey am I coming in, and how can I add value to that? Hopefully that answers your question.
It certainly answers the question in my mind. So thank you so much for that. Um, since we are down to the last 10 minutes, I want to ask you last two questions. Okay. The first one, the penultimate question is that what are, in your opinion, are the top four qualities that make an emotionally intelligent leader?
Oh, that one. I mean, I totally subscribe to Daniel Goleman's thinking in that, because a lot of time, also, like, I've read the book a few times, but along with that, I've also designed and developed training courses where I've taken people away for 2 full days and got them to really go through this whole, the whole emotional intelligence cycle. So, Asma, we've actually done that as exercises. And one the core thing I would say for emotional intelligence is self-awareness, right? I'm not just saying it because it's one of the most talked about ones, but it is so true that I would be so lost if I didn't get time with myself. And that is one of the things, even in the pandemic, you will see a lot of people who didn't realize it during the pandemic are realizing it now. Because self awareness essentially is that time when you're talking to yourself and you're figuring out what is going on in your mind. Why is this going on? A lot of us, you'll be surprised, a lot of us don't understand that, and that is a core pillar, right? If you were to put every other competency away and just one, then this has to be it. So often, like, I'll tell you a simple example of things that I do to tap into my own self-awareness is like before I log in the morning, like 9 o'clock, let's assume I'm logging in at 8:45, 8:50, I will just sit and journal for 5 minutes saying, this is how I'm feeling, this is what my day looks like, and this is how I want to go into my day, and this is how I want to come out of my day. I want to go into my day feeling a little positive, and I want to finish these top three things, and I want to come away feeling that I've really achieved something today, as an example. Or today I'm feeling really tired, but I want to just get through the day, and I want to take it easy today. But it's just telling yourself, setting that scene for yourself. So self-awareness is really critical. And I do these self-awareness things, like journaling or writing little posts. I do it even on my iPhone in my notes, but it helps me reconnect with myself to say, where am I actually going and why am I actually doing this? And if you try and do it, you'll find it really funny, because it is a very good, honest way to look at yourself and to say, do you really want to do this? You might find sometimes, like I find, like if I'm sat on a train and I'm going somewhere and I say, do I really want to go? No, I don't think I want to go. Then why did I say yes? Okay, next time I need to think more. Okay, so that's just like a note to self. That's your self-awareness part. Hopefully that helps. Next part is then that self-regulation, which is the second step to that, what we just spoke. So when you're more self-aware, I tend to say yes too often. As a typical example, I need to say no more. You start to regulate yourself to say, okay, I know this happens with me. I know I want to do this differently. So what am I going to do about it? So that is your second part. And I always say in my posts as well, I say emotions are data, right? So that's your data telling you, hey, Vinita, you always do this. So that's your data point. Next time, regulate a little better. Don't do it like this. Okay, fine. So that's your internal self-awareness and self-regulation. Then the third one I would say to you is connecting with people. So once you're in a good space to go, I'm here because I really want to be here, and I really want to meet Manu, or I really want to meet Azma. I'm sitting and talking to them. Now I'm going to focus on them because I came here to understand more about Azma, right? So then that is your third part, which is building relations for the sake of understanding the other person, not for the sake of getting your own objective out of it, right? So that's essentially the third one. The fourth one I would say is motivation. So continuously motivating yourself is a very key, I would say, outcome in some ways, because when you're able to do this as a cycle, it is so self-sustaining and so self-rewarding that it just continues beautifully, I would say.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense, and I think so. After this event, we usually send out a mailer, and that is one with learnings, and that is going to be one of the things that we'll be sharing in that, of course, because seriously, it's impossible to share everything in a single mailer. There's so much we've learned today. Uh, Vinita, lastly, you have written two books, and you have just about finished the third one. Tell us about your books, please.
So my books, it depends on who you are, where you come from. So some of my books might appeal to people in the financial sector. The first one really was about conduct, and I happened to write that, let's say, about 5 years ago. And again, from my emotional journey perspective, I'm a very restless person. I constantly need to be learning something, growing, achieving, or creating something. Not necessarily from a career perspective, but in whatever way, right? So like, for example, this, I'm contributing in whatever way, and I feel good about that. And you can see, none of this I do is because I have to do it, right? It is what drives me. Same way in writing my book, the first book, I was working in Barclays at that time, and I was doing a role in conduct. And I thought, well, this is not a speech. I used to speak in a lot of events, and like similar to what we're doing, all the face to face. And then I thought, well, that's not a speech, that's a full book. I could write a book out of this. And so I just worked like a crazy maniac for 4 months continuously, waking up at 4:30, and I finished that book. So that was my first book that I ever wrote. The next one I wrote was after all of that journey. I thought I want to become an entrepreneur, and I set up a small business to import Indian spices into London. And I set that business, and I ran that business for about a year, after which I realized this is really not me. And I shut that business. So essentially, that book is about that journey in that business, to say, what did I learn? Why did I start it? Which is called panic, saying, okay, I panicked to say, I don't want to be fully dependent on my job. I want to have a diversified income source. So I want to also start a business. So that's how I started, because I'm a single parent. A lot of you might relate or understand this. Like, I will always worry, right? Saying if something was to happen to me, then I've got two children. So that was the first part where I thought, okay, I want to set up a business. And then I got more perspective, I would say, out of it. So that's why I've called it Panic to Perspective. And I thought, this isn't me. I'm not enjoying it. I don't want to do it. And I shut it. So that's the second book. If any of you is looking to start a business, I would say read that, because it's very small, it's handy, and it's very true. And the third one that I am still, it's with the editor. I have finished writing it, but it's with the editor. That is a fiction, and that is a fiction of essentially, it's a literary fiction which is slightly based on my life, but it's about like finding your voice, and it's very much based on Indian women as we grow up. And there is this entire mindset of, you've got to get married, you've got to have children, doesn't matter if you don't study, because essentially it doesn't matter if you don't earn. But here I am in a completely different scenario where all of that upbringing doesn't apply in various ways. So it's about, how do you go from that to where I am right now? But I've put it in the form of like fictional characters, fictional, so that it's more interesting. So I just made it as fiction. Yeah.
Looking forward to that one as well, guys. Just to remind you, there are two books. One is C Tunes: How to Keep Up with Conduct in the Post-Crisis World, and one which was, I believe, published last year was From Panic to Perspective: The Story of My Failed Business. And of course, a third one will be coming out. So
I haven't
please
said
do
the
check
name
them
of that
out.
one yet.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. I'm sure people will keep a watch out for that. We still have 3 minutes. So since you talked about being a single parent, any tips for other single working parents for self-care?
Working parents for self-care.
Yeah,
I think the main
single
thing,
working parents.
single working parents for self-care, I would say the most important thing is, when you're single, a lot of people will say to me, oh, why do you care to do this? Why do you care to do that? But the most important thing is two things, right? So one is, if I look after myself, I'm in a better capacity to look after my children. So that's like, first, understanding the importance, right? Because a lot of times we don't do it, not because we don't know how to do it, but because we don't understand the relevance, right? So as I always say, empty cups don't pour. So you've got to feel good about yourself, so that you can then feel good when you're with the kids, right? Assuming I feel, oh my God, my life is deprived, and then I will feel, okay, the children are, because of the children, I can't live a full life. So then you start to, that cycle is not fun. So first thing is, remember that. Second thing is, remember that the kids are watching you. So you're a role model all the time. So as a tip, I would say, key thing is, live that life that you think you want your children to be living. If you want your children to be eating rubbish food, not caring about themselves, working crazy long hours, and just completely disregarding anything to do with your own well-being, then that's what they're going to learn. So as they always say, right, children don't do what you tell them, they will do what you do. So that's the key tip, is what is the life you want to give them, then first live it yourself.
Neither, thank you so much. I think this has been a very enlightening hour. We have learned so much today, and uh, and I hope to the viewers that you got most of your questions answered. I'm sorry that there is a shortage of time, so we weren't able to answer all the questions, but nonetheless, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We talked about what exactly is emotional intelligence. I think that's a question that so many of us keep asking ourselves and don't really find the answer. So we kind of got the answer for that. And we talked about how it is important to have emotionally intelligent leaders in HRs for the success of an organization, of a business. We of course talked about, are leaders even allowed to panic? And got a really nice perspective around, sure, yes, absolutely, it's just an issue that if the leader keeps panicking again and again and again, then that might be a situation we might want to scrutinize a little bit more. And we did talk about practical tips to become emotionally intelligent, and also about creating a good work culture in organizations and taking care of employees. As well as, of course, we ended it with learning about how, as a single parent, you can take care of yourself, right? So, thank you
You
so
must.
much, everyone.
You
Yeah,
must. You
you
must. Not you
must.
can. You must.
You must, absolutely. So, Vinita, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. It was truly a pleasure and an honor for us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, guys. And if any of you want to send your questions over, you can continue the questions. So thank you so much, and thank you for listening and your questions.
Thank you so much. And just to remind everyone that in case you're an organization looking to for more guidance in terms of being more emotionally intelligent, whether as leaders, as employees, or just taking care of your emotional wellness, please do connect with us at the link that you see scrolling, which is bit.ly/YD corporates, and we would be happy to guide you with that. With that, I would like to end this episode. Please do join us again next week, same time, at the same place, and we will be talking to another amazing speaker again. Thank you again, and please be safe and be well.
Thank you.